Hey there guys, Unofficial Star Wars here. I hope you're all doing well, and in today's video we are breaking down the first episode, episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. So without further ado, we're going to jump right on into it. Fair warning, and very obviously there are going to be spoilers here for the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett, so you have been warned. We're going to break down the overall episode with a few things that you may have missed here and there. I'm going to give you guys some of my own personal thoughts and opinions, and then closer towards the end of the video we're going to have some theories and speculations here, so make sure you guys are staying tuned for that. The overall episode just wants you hungering for more of what is to come here with this overall story, and what this overall story has to offer, and what this overall character as well has to offer. And we saw some very interesting things going on with this episode. Now, some people are going to argue that there wasn't a lot going on with this episode, and that some people are going to argue that there was tons going on with this episode. We had flashbacks, we had present time type of scenarios going on with Boba and Fennec Shand taking on the role of Jabba the Hutt, essentially, or Bib Fortuna, and taking over Jabba's palace. So yes, while it may feel a little underwhelming, it at the same time is fairly overwhelming. So let's go ahead and really begin on where we're breaking this down. The overall episode begins inside Jabba the Hutt's former palace, which is now the belonging home of Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, as they now have taken it over from Bib Fortuna. The overall episode starts out with an absolute banger of giving us flashbacks, and not just flashbacks to anything, but having flashbacks towards episode 2, Attack of the Clones on Kamino, and I was just, oh my god, I was absolutely blown away from that. This is something that Tamora Morrison said was going to happen. I just didn't think it was going to be happening this soon within this overall show. This literally happened in the first 2 minutes of the episode, and it was absolutely stunning and absolutely amazing, and really helps set up the overall tone / theme here for this overall show of what we're going to be seeing here. Robert Rodriguez, who is the overall director for many of the episodes here for the Book of Boba Fett, describes the overall show and many of its episodes being a lot more nittier and grittier, especially compared to The Mandalorian Season 2 and The Mandalorian Season 1 as a whole, the overall show of what we have seen from that overall show. And this first episode semi-proves it to an extent. Must I remind you, in the first 2-3 minutes of Season 1, Episode 1 of The Mandalorian, he chops a guy in half with a door, so that was pretty violent. And I think that this overall show is going to give off those same vibes. Whether or not it's more or less is yet to be determined on my end of things. Something throughout this overall episode as well that we see Boba continuously struggling for is his back to tank. It's like he absolutely needs it and is living off of it, and it's helping him heavily to restore his body from many of the wounds that we see in the flashback scenes here when he is coming out of the sarlacc pit, which was absolutely an amazing scene. I was absolutely blown away, and to finally see how he pulled it off and how he was able to survive that was absolutely amazing. And especially to finally see that in canon now, or rather also in live action, is something a whole lot more, and I think is absolutely amazing. The overall explanation of how Boba is able to survive the sarlacc pit, I don't want to have any intended hate over to the Star Wars sequels, but they explained it a little better than they explained how Palpatine returned. And I'll simply just leave it at that, quite honestly. He's able to make his way over to a stormtrooper who seemingly is already deceased and dead. It takes his air tube and uses that to get some oxygen for one thing, and then furthermore uses it as a flamethrower, or uses it for his flamethrower to essentially just blow up the sarlacc pit to smithereens. And then we see that he's able to crawl his way out of there. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't actually use his jetpack at any point in time when he was trying to get out of there, but it might have been broken. Who's to really say? And then after that, he essentially just completely blacks out and passes out for what seems like endlessly days, which to an extent feels a little unrealistic, but you guys gotta take into consideration this guy is really going through it, so it might have not really been days, although it felt like days. He was there for a good, I would say, around a solid 24 hours, depending on whatever that boils down to necessarily be on Tatooine. From there, we see that the Jawas make their way around and take his armor, and then from there we see that essentially explains, and that is the explanation that we got in Mandalorian Season 2 on how Cobb Vanth was able to get a hold of the Boba Fett armor. From there, this next part here is seemingly very interesting to me. To an extent, the Tusken Raiders come what I thought was going to be rescuing him, but they pretty much just take him prisoner, and this is something that boils down to be very interesting, and something that's furthermore explained towards the end of the episode. I can't completely remember where I heard this or saw this, whether it was a rumor, a leak, what was covered in a book, a comic book, or it was already explained in Mando Season 2. I honestly honestly cannot remember, but somewhere in the mix of all of that, he is essentially taken in by the Tusken Raiders, is what is said, and that essentially is exactly what happens at the end of the episode after being their prisoner for this entire episode and being completely miserable. And like I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, Tamora Morrison did mention that there's going to be plenty of flashbacks in this overall series, and let's take a look at this. Pretty much half of this episode here was essentially all flashbacks, and no complaints on that end. That was absolutely amazing and something that's well overdue and well deserved for Boba Fett and his character, something that many fans have longed to have actually seen, and I wanted some type of explanation here for how his character was able to survive the Sarlacc pit and his supposed death in Return of the Jedi, and from where he went on from there. After that, he's taken to their camp here after being traveling for like what seems like hours on end, having two suns beating down on him, hasn't had water or food in days. Bro is literally like on the blink of death at this point in time. He's at his absolute worst and his absolute lowest point here from what I'm guessing we're ever going to see in the Boba Fett legacy at this point in time, but who's to actually really say for what we're going to see in the rest of this overall show and what's to actually come, and that's something I'm going to talk about in just a few moments here. Let's talk about the rest of this overall episode. From there, Boba is taken prisoner and taken to their camp. He then makes a grand escape actually from this camp here from the Tusken Raiders by luring the dog thing over and cutting the rope with its teeth after knocking it out, and then makes a run for it. However, he's spotted by one of the Tusken children, and then the rest of the Tuskens go after him. They put up a little bit of a fight here, show him off here, whack him with a stick. He's knocked out cold, and is later of course brought back to the camp, but after that point in time, he's waken up once again from Fennec Shand from the back to tank, and we're back in present time, so to speak here, taking place simultaneously, or at least after the event of Mando Season 2. This overall show, the Book of Boba Fett's being called a Mando Season 2.5, or rather being described as a Mandalorian Season 2.5. Fennec Shand tells Boba that people have come to pay their respects essentially for the new king of Jabba's palace, or should I say Boba's palace now at this point in time. The droid that is helping translate some of the guests that are there at the palace is called an AD series smelter droid, and it was first seen in Return of the Jedi, later seen in Star Wars Battlefront and some of its DLCs, and also seen in Star Wars The Clone Wars. It's not necessarily a protocol droid in order to essentially communicate between these different species, but it kind of helps get the point across to somewhat of an extent. One of the Trandoshan bounty hunters that we also see is a lot like Bosk for one thing, and the same species, hence Trandoshan, and for another thing, Boba Fett mentions that he used to actually work for this Trandoshan, and he seems that it's kind of funny that now this Trandoshan is essentially worshipping him at this point in time. This character definitely reappears as we have seen in the trailers, and that is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit of a moment here when we get into more of the review parts here with this overall episode here. But keep an eye on this character. This Trandoshan will be reappearing. Whether or not he's going to be playing some sort of substantial role or not within the rest of this overall series is completely out of my hands, and I have absolutely no idea. One last thing with this Trandoshan character, if you guys look closely, his gift to Boba Fett is actually Wookiee fur or a Wookiee pelt, which is pretty interesting and a callback to the Chewbacca species of the Wookiees. We then run into a little bit of a trouble here with the mayor's speaker, rather, and we definitely seem to run into some trouble with this overall character as he expects Boba Fett to gift and pay tributes and respects to the mayor instead of vice versa, because they're all gathering here to pay respects to Boba Fett and his new throne and taking over the overall palace. So it definitely creates a little bit of attention, and I think we're going to be seeing more from this supposed mayor and what he has to say for Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. Later on, we also see two Gamorrean guards that are also gifted to Boba and Fennec Shand and act as bodyguards, as we see later on in the episode. My guess is that this guy on the screen right now is actually the mayor, and I think he's going to be playing some sort of substantial role within the later of this overall series. The two Gamorrean guards are going to be playing a type of bodyguard type of role, like I had mentioned for Fennec Shand and Boba Fett, so it's definitely cool to see the return of these pig-like creatures here in the Star Wars universe. Now, my most favorite scene, I think, and a huge highlight, aside from seeing Boba Fett escaping the Sarlacc pit and really the overall rest of this overall episode, because it was absolutely amazing, but a huge high point for me in this overall episode is when we see Fennec Shand and Boba Fett walk into the Mos Espa overall city here, and we see these characters go into a cantina to be greeted by some of the other underworld-like characters here for Mos Espa and the overall planet of Tatooine. And inside of this cantina, we see the one and only return of Max Rebo and one of the guys that plays the saxophone from that band as well. His name is Friggin Dane. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but sorry if I'm not. And also supposedly in the background of this overall scene, we can also see RX-24, whoever really that is. Not completely sure, sorry about that, but Friggin Dane is one of the cantina players that we see in the original trilogy, so it's definitely a really cool playback to see these two musical characters making their comeback, and also to see that Max Rebo survived the Jabba the Hutt's sail barge explosion and Return of the Jedi. We later learn that this cantina is called the Sanctuary, so to speak, and they meet with Garsa Fwip, who is essentially one of the owners, or is the owner of the Sanctuary, which is a nice little safe spot and a pretty much like a gathering spot for Mos Espa, what it seems like, and for what a lot of the rulers of the palace, Jabba's palace, Bib Fortuna and Jabba the Hutt, at least, where they always went, I guess. It was a lot like a hangout type of spot. Unfortunately, after they leave the Sanctuary, they're attacked by the assassins in this scene. Now, absolutely no idea who these assassins are working for, where they came from, or anything like that. Of course, I have my few guesses of the theories and speculations that I'm going to be holding here a little for the later on at the end of the video, so make sure you guys are staying tuned for that. But essentially, after beating them up, and with the help of the Gamorrean pig-like guards here, Fennec Shand runs after two of them, killing one of them, or at least throwing him off of a building and taking another one captive and bringing him back. This is something we're going to be seeing in Chapter 2, Episode 2 here for the Book of Boba Fett, and something I'm very, very excited to see. However, in this surprise attack, Boba sustains a few wounds, and the Gamorrean guards take him back to his palace and throw him back into the Bacta tank, where he later has more flashbacks, and we see the return and how he essentially is able to become friends with these Tusken Raiders and join their camp. The Tusken child makes a comeback in this flashback, and it takes Boba Fett and this Rodian and takes him to the middle of the desert, essentially to dig up for water. And water is said to be in these little, like, I don't even know, they're like little coconuts, essentially, in the desert. And in the mix of this, while they're digging around for it, the Rodian accidentally stumbles upon a giant monster-like thing. It's like those things that are from the Greek mythology that are mixed with half man, half horse. I think you guys get the point on what I'm trying to say here. And essentially, we see Boba comes to the rescue in this point in time. He takes the chains and takes this thing's head off, essentially, and they bring it back to the camp as a seemingly reward and communication to say that, hey, Boba Fett just saved me, is essentially what this Tusken Raider child is saying, and they essentially take him in officially rather than just a prisoner. He is now officially a part of this Tusken Raider camp. Now, later on, we're going to get into some of these theories and speculations now, and so one of those theories and speculations begins with, we know how essentially Boba Fett is able to use and how he is trained so well with the Tusken staff now that we see in Mando Season 2 when he helps out Mandalorian, or Din Djarin the Mandalorian, by beating up all these stormtroopers. He learns that from the Tusken Raiders, and this is shortly after his staying, or while he's at least with these Tusken Raiders and staying with them. It's only honestly what I think would honestly be a solid few weeks at this point in time from when he's able to escape the Sarlacc pit on staying with the Tusken Raiders, and then meets up with Fennec Shand, and then they go on to meet up with the Mandalorian to get back his armor that we see in Mando Season 2. Despite that, Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 are meant to be taking place 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, so we can say that Boba spent quite some time in the Sarlacc pit, at least seemingly from at least what we know at this point in time. Maybe him and Fennec Shand had spent, or at least him himself had spent a little more time with the Tusken Raiders than we actually essentially knew. That's just something that's yet to be seen, honestly. Now, talking about some other theories and speculations, the guys that attack Fennec Shand, the Gamorrean guards, and Boba Fett that we saw later in the episode, there's a lot of theories and speculations from fans, Star Wars fans, in the overall community saying that these guys are from Crimson Dawn, and that we're going to be seeing Kira and the return of Darth Maul somewhere in this overall show. And while it doesn't make a lot of sense for Darth Maul to necessarily appear in the Book of Boba Fett because he's very, very dead at this point in time, I still think it would be really cool cool that we could get at least some type of mention, and I definitely think that we could very well could see Kira if that is the case. My own personal thoughts and opinions on this overall episode, I'm very glad I stayed up till 3 a.m. in the morning for this, because it was definitely worth it, honestly, at the end of the day. Now, leaving a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I stayed up till 3 in the morning for the Hawkeye finale, and if you're a Marvel fan, well, we all know how that kind of went. Check out my Marvel stuff. It's linked down in the description down below, Instagram and YouTube if you're into it. And so while I definitely think it was definitely well worth the time for staying up till that late for something like this, it was definitely really awesome. It could have been better in some points and spots in here and there, but then again, this isn't a direct replica of what is quote-unquote the Mandalorian formula, where they would show something at the end of the episode. At the end of this episode, they didn't show us anything. They didn't give us any big teases for who the main villains are going to be for this overall series or anything like that. They didn't give us like a Baby Yoda type moment, is what a lot of people have been calling it, where they show something maybe extremely cute at the end of the episode that's going to be playing quite a significant role here throughout the rest of the episode or anything like that. They didn't reveal any main or major villains or anything like that, and it honestly just keeps you wanting to come back for more and more, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing next week here on the channel. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified when our next video does come out. Of course, I'm going to have all types of theories and speculation videos here on the channel throughout the rest of the week, all the way up until the next episode comes out every single day, hopefully, as long as my schedule doesn't get too busy. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so you guys don't miss any of that. At the end of the day, this here is a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even 8.5 out of 10. It didn't show us anything major that is, you know, a huge surprise or anything like that, but then again, this overall show is meant to be about Boba Fett, and something that The Mandalorian Season 2 didn't necessarily struggle on, but it introduced and had a lot of fan service, quote unquote, but it did feature a lot of characters that kind of drew the overall story away from who the Mandalorian exactly is, and hopefully that's something Mando Season 3 does. I'll make a separate video talking a little bit more in depth on that overall. That's essentially, however, what the Book of Boba Fett is doing. It's simply just focusing on Boba Fett for at least as of right now from what we've seen, and that's something I'm absolutely in love with and very, very glad that they're doing. I hope that this overall show focuses on the Kamino clones and Jango Fett and Boba Fett and the Fetts as a whole, whether that's Bad Batch or Omega. Of course, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to complain if Mace Windu somehow shows up, or if we get a look at the Bad Batch in live action, or if we see Luke Skywalker again. No complaints on that end of anything, of course, at least on my own personal thoughts and opinions, but I don't feel like too many people would be too happy with that, because it draws the story away from Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. And so with that, guys, let me know of your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. Guys, what did you guys think about this first episode of the Book of Boba Fett? Guys, I'd love to hear what you guys all think down in the comment section down below. Drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, as it really does help the channel. Instagram, unofficial Star Wars for more Star Wars related content, guys. Thanks so much for watching today's video. As always, may the Force be with you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.